Her car sat inside his garage as if she owned it, the engine still ticking. She crossed her arms and said with a sneer, "It's just a garage. You don't need it." But what she didn't know, what would soon silence the whole neighborhood, was that he held the power to lock her car inside. The sun sank low over the cul-de-sac, draping the quiet suburban street in shades of gold and shadow. Families were settling into dinners, porch lights blinked awake, and sprinklers whispered across lawns trimmed to perfection. On this block, appearances were everything. Rules were written into thick homeowner association manuals, but unwritten laws weighed heavier. Who belonged, who didn't. Marcus stood at the edge of his driveway, keys in hand, his breath steady though his jaw tightened. His garage door was open, but it was not his truck sitting there. Instead, a silver sedan gleamed beneath the fluorescent bulb, parked boldly, deliberately, as if the space were hers. And standing beside it, arms folded and chin raised, was Mrs. Keaton, the HOA board member every neighbor quietly called Karen. Her voice cut through the stillness. "Relax, Marcus. It's just a garage. You don't need it tonight." The words dripped with entitlement, sharp enough to slice through the respect he had carried since moving here. Neighbors peeked from windows but did not intervene. Silence hung heavy, as if the whole street had agreed to let arrogance have its stage. Marcus said nothing. His silence was not weakness, it was control, but behind his calm eyes lived storms no one here could see. Years ago, he had worn a uniform that carried weight, a symbol of duty in places far harsher than this manicured suburb. The desert heat had scorched his skin, the sound of mortar fire still pulsed in his memory. He had buried brothers in arms under foreign skies, carried their names home like medals no one could see. When he finally returned, he wanted only peace, a safe place for his daughter to grow, a neighborhood where lawns grew green and nights were quiet. He bought this home with sweat and sacrifice, pouring his life savings into a promise that he belonged here as much as anyone. Yet from the first week, Karen made it her mission to remind him otherwise. Notices taped to his door about lawn height, warnings about his truck parked an inch too close to the curb, snide comments about keeping standards. And now, this. Her car in his garage, her sneer daring him to object. The quiet stretched. His daughter, 8 years old, peeked through the living room curtains, her small face etched with confusion. She had seen her father face storms with dignity, never raising his voice. Tonight would be no different. Karen's smirk widened. "You should be grateful, Marcus. People like you don't usually get to live in neighborhoods like this. Consider it a favor that I even feel safe leaving my car here." The words struck deeper than she knew, or perhaps exactly as she intended. The neighbors who had gathered silently shifted their weight but said nothing. Their silence was complicity, their inaction an echo of every injustice Marcus had endured before. Still, he did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply pressed the button on the remote in his hand. The garage door rumbled down, slow and heavy, sealing the car inside. Gasps rose from the shadows. Karen's eyes widened as the reality settled over her. She was locked out of her own arrogance, trapped by the very man she had mocked. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Respect is not optional. Not in my home." Karen sputtered, searching for words, but none came. The neighbors who once watched silently now leaned closer, whispers rippling like a tide. For the first time, the power shifted. Not through confrontation, not through rage, but through dignity unshaken. Inside, Marcus's daughter smiled from behind the curtain. She saw her father not just as protector, but as teacher. His silence had spoken louder than any shout ever could. Karen knocked on the door, demanding release, but Marcus did not rush. He let the weight of the moment linger, let her feel what it meant to be powerless in the space she had tried to claim. Finally, he opened the door, her car keys waiting in his outstretched hand. Next time, he said quietly. Knock before you step into someone else's home. The crowd stood still, their silence no longer complicity but respect. Some nodded, some lowered their eyes in shame for not speaking sooner. Karen snatched her keys, her face burning, and drove away without another word. The garage was empty again, but the victory remained. Not the petty triumph of locking someone's car inside, but the deeper one of showing an entire street that dignity cannot be trespassed and respect cannot be denied. As the night deepened and porch lights flickered across the block, Marcus sat with his daughter on the porch swing. She rested her head against his arm, safe, proud, and quiet. She whispered just for him to hear, "Dad, you didn't even have to yell." And he smiled, because she had understood the lesson perfectly. "Silent strength," he murmured, "is the loudest voice." The neighbors who had watched began to talk differently after that night. Some came to shake his hand. Some brought small offerings of apology, cookies, a wave, a nod of respect. The HOA meetings grew quieter, Karen's voice less sharp, her challenges less frequent. She had been humbled, not by force, but by the unshakable calm of a man who refused to let arrogance write the rules of his life. And though Marcus never sought recognition, his story traveled beyond that cul-de-sac. A tale whispered in community gatherings, shared online, retold as proof that dignity needs no weapon but truth. Because in a world quick to shout, the ones who stand in silence often speak the loudest. So, what about you? What does this story stir in your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. And for more stories that honor silent heroes and unseen battles, subscribe now. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the greatest power.